Hi everyone, this is Sejazasam from Nexus TV and you're watching Zoom Boom. Our guest today is Kenneth Scott. Kenneth is a lawyer and he's the brain trust of Gemstone University and the leader of Pantera Douro Private Society. He's a private lawyer and he's really experienced in terms of law and so on, and he really sees what happens in the world. So we are really pleased to have him here, and he's going to update us in the things which are happening right now in the world. Hi, Kenneth. Nice to see you here.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here. And I want to, because you've used that phrase a few times, lawyer, private lawyer, I do want to define for people that the term lawyer simply means one who is learned in the law and fully conversant in how the law really works. It's not an attorney. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a member of the bar. And an attorney basically is a legal mechanic for the state, basically. A lawyer understands principles of law and universal principles, equity and things like that. And this is what I do, and this is what we have been building in Gemstone University, which you can find at gemstoneuniversity.org or on YouTube. There's videos under that name as our channel. And basically, the study of law has led me down many paths, but inclusive of understanding current world events, which is what you would like to talk about today.
Yes. Basically, in the previous interviews, you may check, we summarized what was the history of humanity and the law till today. And this revealed quite in-depth information about our current world system and how the world works and why the things are as they are currently. Anyway, we have good news from Kenneth because he mentioned that there are very great events happened recently that caused that people are waking up and the current working system is changing. So, Kenneth, would you please elaborate on that a bit?
Okay. As usual with me, I need to lay the foundation first, okay?
Please do.
The foundation is that, as we talked about in the earlier interviews, we're in a world or reality of a directed agenda that intended to enslave, control, and own all the people in this world and all the property, all the resources, all the wealth, and essentially eliminate a lot of the population and have a reduced population that could be completely controlled by an elite class that would make that population their slaves and live like kings and gods on this planet. The way they tried to achieve that was basically to put the world into a complete global state of bankruptcy in terms of the way the law works, which we're not going to go into how the law works in relationship to that. But just know that in 1933, specifically March of 1933, specifically through the days March 4th to March 9th, certain things were put in place when Franklin Roosevelt first took office as president, that on March 9th put the United States into a status or state of bankruptcy. Okay. Entities such as governments, municipalities, even national entities can be in bankruptcy. After that was put in place, that in the next roughly 15 to 17 years, the global monetary system was attached to the US currency, the Federal Reserve Note, or the US dollar. And that became the reserve currency of the entire world through the central banks. That was something that occurred at a meeting in a town called Bretton Woods, and that's called the Bretton Woods Agreement. And that was in place that created the US dollar as the sole world currency on the planet. And that, when we say reserve currency, that means that all the central banks retained as much of the US dollar as they could for purposes of exchange or settlement for their local currency. Excuse me. And that was that led to 1971 when the US was taken off the gold standard, where the US dollar could be exchanged back to the US system for gold. And what that did is it created the petrodollar, so that the consumption of petroleum, as it increased, required an increase of the US dollar, so that the US dollar became the dominant currency on the planet. And progressively from the 30s through the 60s, almost all of the nation states were converted to being corporations, and those corporations were put into bankruptcy. Those corporations, as a bankrupt entity, were under the master bankrupt corporation called the United States. Okay. Then a facility was created where every newborn baby was turned into essentially a franchise of a bankrupt corporation worldwide. Okay. And was given permission to operate within the global system of commerce and money. By that being the case, and all the humans on the planet agreeing by their behavior and their actions, accepting that status, they became technically in law a surety bank, a bonded surety, meaning that their life, their creation in life, their work capacity to create value that got converted to money, they were the guarantor of all the debt that was attached to the franchise that was their individual name. So basically, our status is a bonded surety to a bankrupt franchise. And in bankruptcy, you have two things: reorganization or liquidation. So if I'm a company that's gone into reorganization, bankruptcy, the bankruptcy court allows me to submit a plan how I'm going to reorganize my business or my company so that eventually I can fulfill my commitment to the creditors while still being in possession of my my assets, my equipment, my building, whatever my business is. If I'm a baker, I need a building and an oven to bake my bread, trucks to deliver it. So if I'm a reorganized bankrupt, then I need to be in possession of those assets, but those assets are attached to the bankruptcy authority or the court for the ultimate benefit of the creditors. Okay.
Yep.
So imagine that the entire world is a bankrupt corporation in reorganization, maintaining possession of the collateral that's pledged as surety to guarantee the performance of the payment of the debt. That's who we are. We're the surety or the bonded guarantor to that bankrupt franchise, which is part of a bankrupt corporation called Hungary or Austria or Germany or United States or Canada. Those are all bankrupt subdivisions of the master bankrupt United States. The ultimate goal was to go into liquidation. And the history of the last 150 years was how the ultimate collateral that the bankrupt reorganized entity was holding was the people and the property of the entire world. And that the goal was to collapse the world economy and to liquidate the
People.
collateral. Okay.
Liquidate people,
Not,
right?
yeah, to liquidate, and it's called basically bankruptcy liquidation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called liquidated damages. So, you know, if you're a judgment creditor, if a court gives you fines in your favor and you've sued somebody, they're called the judgment debtor, you're the judgment creditor. Whatever the amount of money that they're going to pay or other performance is called liquidated damages, that the debtor is liquidated to fulfill the obligation of the judgment. Okay. So in bankruptcy, essentially the same thing. So who would be the liquidated collateral? The people and the property. This is what the World Economic Forum so-called Great Reset is trying to achieve. the liquidated damages to claim that all the people on the planet now are the property of the state, and all of the property is the property of the state, the global state. Okay. And all I can say at this time, but this is, today we're doing this interview on October 9th, 2022. Not sure when you plan to publish it, but this may be a fact already known, or it may be still yet to come. But there is a moment that's going to come in the very near future. I'm quite sure that it will happen in the month of October, the month that we're in, that we only have 22 days left for. Could be pushed to November, but I'm pretty sure it's October. This is going to be revealed to the whole world, that there was a group of players in the military and in banking and in law and politics and many other places that actually countered that agenda and flipped it upside down, essentially turned the bankrupt creditor into the bankrupt debtor, and basically liquidated that bankrupt debtor and took control of all the assets that they were going to say belong to them, and essentially set something up to to initiate a new monetary system backed by the wealth of the world that had been stolen, so that the new monetary system could start in a state of solvency, which means a bankrupt is insolvent, but when you're not bankrupt, you're solvent. So to start in a state of solvency, where a real economic relationship between the money that's issued against the wealth that backs it up is consistent, is whole. In other words, you're not issuing $1,000 of paper for $100 of real value. You issue $1,000 or 1,000 units for 1,000 units of value. Okay, that's called a solvent economic monetary system.
So no
That's
leverage in the system, right?
Yeah, no leverage, no fractional reserve banking, no derivatives, none of that, all of which are Ponzi schemes that were done over the last 100 years to lead to a point where they could put everybody in bankruptcy, collapse the system, and say, well, you're no longer capable of supporting the debt, so therefore we're going to claim all the collateral.
Was this a person who turned this around? And how did he do that?
Well,
Or what?
the how will have to come another time, but there was
Okay,
lots of beings,
lots of
not persons. Persons are corporate fictions.
okay.
Beings or living beings are actually the you and me and everybody listening. Were there a lot of beings, or was there one being? No, there was a lot of beings. There's something that's been being developed and consolidated and brought to a conclusion over the last, basically since World War II, so 80 plus years. And the history of it is quite extraordinary. The storyline of it is truly the most amazing story that will ever be told. The history will be told soon, and it'll take years for it to really sort of filter down to the people to really understand it, because as we've talked about in our previous conversations, people are in a controlled, mind controlled hologram. What they accept as reality is only a fabrication. It's a Hollywood movie. So it's going to take time for people to let go of the Hollywood movie and start waking up to the real story. But that's
Kenneth,
about to start.
Kenneth, we are saying out things quite frankly. Would you please share some more details about how it happened?
There's certain things I cannot talk about,
Believe.
but they will be able to be talked about soon. But yeah, it's hard for me to talk around the things I can't talk about and say, well, to answer your question. So let's just say that's going to be the mystery at hand. Like I said, by the time you air this conversation, it may be totally revealed. And so then the answer to your question is already out there. We don't have to answer it. If by the time you air this, it's not fully there, when it's at a point where I'm able to talk about that, I'd be happy to.
So then let's just briefly talk about the format. It will come out. Do you think shall we watch media or what is
Yeah,
the
well, okay, so yeah, I can answer that. So, we have this situation in the United States where there's a contentious thing about the election that happened 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And there's the Trump side that says it was a stolen election, it was fraudulent, and all the rest of that, and that the Biden presidency is really a fake presidency. Okay, there's also a lot of things that are out there that are available. Um,
like
I
the
will.
queue and so on?
Well, there's Q, but Q is very oblique. It's a lot of coded messages that you must really follow as a continuum to really understand what's being said. A lot of what is said by the Q post is actually very straight and direct. But you can't take the Q posts out of context and think that you understand it. You really have to go into it as a full continuum. But there's a lot of people who have taken the Q materials and broken it down to much more digestible and understandable for more of the general population. So one man who's done that in an extraordinary way is on a website that's titled x22report.com. So it's the letter X, the number 2 twice, 22, report.com. And you can go onto there and you can look in the archives and you can listen to reports that go back 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and listen to the current stuff. You'll learn a tremendous amount. A lot of the answers to your question that you're asking are just in that one site. It's one of the best things on the planet. Now there's a man who just came out recently who goes by the phrase or the handle SG Anon, and it's on Rumble, and it's called the Q Patriot channel. So if you look for that, there's 16 episodes so far. Most of them are about 30 minutes, and he explains it quite well. So just those two, excuse me, just those two resources will answer your question quite significantly. But basically, the election and the whole Trump presidency was one big sting operation. He was
It was
the
a trap,
lure.
right? It was a trap.
Yeah, sting
Mm.
is a trap where you set it
Okay.
up for the criminals to do something and they get caught in the act, and
Hmm.
it's a trap. And basically, the cabal, the deep state, the Bidenistas, the Obama, Bush, Clinton regime, they're all on the same team.
Okay. This included
I'm
this
sure.
watermark of voting
Yeah,
uh,
and the voting, yeah, all of that.
stuff. Yeah. Mm.
But in a larger context, basically,
Mm.
all the presidents since Kennedy have been on that same side. They've been bought and sold and bribed and blackmailed and all the rest of that. And they've moved it forward. And it's basically good cop, bad cop. If you're a Republican, you don't like the Democrats. So then, they switch and make the Democrats bad guys. And then the Republicans get voted in and then back and forth, back and forth. And so, but they've been fraudulently controlling the elections for about 40 or 50 years. And then it got more and more sophisticated with the electronics and the voting machines and all of that. And basically, so the United States political structure, the presidency, the Congress, all the way down to the municipal city level, they're all controlled. And they're all manipulated, fraudulently put into offices, and then they're told what to do because they have the goods on them, whether that's blackmail or bribes or threats or all the above. And so, but the crescendo point, the real pinnacle of that was this 2020 election, and it was a complete setup to catch them. All of what needs to be brought out is completely in the control of the military. The military controls everything. And also, when I talked about the bankruptcy, we're also under a system of military occupation, foreign occupation by what's now a global military. And so under military rule, under foreign military occupation and under bankruptcy rules, essentially they control both sides, the physical enforcement and the monetary or financial controls. And so, but when Trump was put into office, it was done by the good side of the military, which increasingly got more and more position and control of the US military and entered into an alliance of all, not all, but a couple of dozen, at least 20 to 30 or so major militaries on the planet, which includes Russia, China, India, and so forth. And there's an alliance of the military that has been in control for quite some time. They supported and put Trump into office, and everything that happened in Trump's office, his presidency, is a pre-scripted. They knew what the nasty ones would do.
Mm-hmm.
They did it like playbook. They did every single thing, and everything that was expected. They just did it by their nature of lying, cheating, and stealing, and they were caught. And all of the detail is totally recorded. And before Trump left office, he did certain things that put the the military into martial law, martial control. And so the military has been in control. Martial law means the military controls the civil body, which means the government and all the functions of the civil body.
And now the good guys are in
Yeah.
the military.
And so that's been the case for 5 years.
Mhm.
And the stolen election was allowed to happen. And then in the last year and a half, 20 months roughly, the Biden administration, everybody who's part of that, has been allowed within a controlled framework, not to go totally out of control, but within a controlled framework to do what they've done, to open the borders, to allow the cities to start collapsing, to increase crime, to go into all this inflation, the energy crisis, the Russian invasion, all the Russian sanctions.
Yeah.
That was part of the agenda, or the military agenda for this to happen, because Ukraine was, a major part of the global fascist system.
Yeah.
And so that had to be exposed, which mostly has not yet been exposed. But all of these things have been prepped and put in place for a final exposure. And
was this in connection with White Dragon Society Benjamin Fulford talks about?
well, a lot of what Benjamin Fulford says is accurate. A good amount of what he says is completely inaccurate. And some of what he says in between those two is his speculation or his educated guess that's not very accurate. So he keeps on writing and saying that, well, when the United States goes into bankruptcy, well, clearly he either doesn't know or he doesn't say that the United States as a corporation's been in bankruptcy since March of 1933. Okay. He doesn't know or he doesn't say that bankrupt entity, even though it was structured to be the creditor against the collateral that I described earlier, that he doesn't know that creditor-debtor relationship has been turned over. That's a thing I can't talk about, but will come out soon. So he's a good resource, but you have to use your decoder ring and your discernment to know what's right and what's accurate and what's part accurate. And the only way you can do that is to diversify your sources, not take him as the end all be all. You asked me in a previous conversation we just had about how I apply intuition along with logic and intellectual, research and everything. And one of the most important things is you never take a source as unequivocal and absolute. Everybody has some of the facts wrong. You have to build a diversified cross-referencing capability to see where this piece fits and this one doesn't, and see where, and also a willingness to let go of what you previously thought was true. So that as you
Important.
raise your vibration, your frequency, and you integrate your resonant field, and that holds your expanded being and your awareness capacity, you have to have a level of humility and willingness to let go and say, no, that fact that I thought was real last year or even yesterday, now I see wasn't, but I see how I thought that, and now I see how it fits in an otherwise
Accept
relationship.
development.
Yeah, absolutely. So Fulford is a good source. X22 is a great source. This SG Anon Q Patriot on Rumble is a very good source. And there's many more, and they're all out there. Some of them are known agents for disinformation.
Tell us
They,
some.
um, well, when I say known, meaning they personally know that that's what they're doing, versus those who are sincere that they're saying what they think they know, but they are actually truly agents of the matrix. And Charlie Ward and Simon Parks, I would say they're sincere. They believe what they're reporting, but they're I don't know, purposely or by just
By the
because their
feeling.
source,
Yeah.
or their sources don't know or whatever. But a good amount of what they say is not precisely accurate, and so they're good examples. I don't know. There's so many. You could ask me some that you follow, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you my opinion.
You could mention those who know that they are agents. Do you know those? Would you say a few of those?
That's a very good question. I don't know if I could pull that out of my head
Okay.
on the
Uh,
spur of the moment.
okay. I mean,
um,
I've been listening, for example, a lot of things of David Icke.
David Icke, yeah. hmm
What do you think about him? What he
I've
says?
always liked David Icke.
Yeah.
I've been following him
Super.
since his beginning, like mid '90s. um, some of the things he talks about as absolute literal truths, the reptilian, shape shifting and stuff like that, would in his earlier years, I don't ascribe to as a literal fact, but there's certain energetics and the genetics of it that I'm quite certain are true. But the little old lady known as Queen Elizabeth, being somebody who is in the basement and then turns into an 8-foot reptile, and no, I don't follow that. That
Mm.
was his earlier. He doesn't talk about that anymore, but that was his earlier perspective. Um, but by and large, I'm totally in agreement that the elite are reptilian bloodlines. And this goes back to our first interview and conversation about Sumerian. And this is where Anton Park's work comes in so importantly. And but other than that, his general position on consciousness, spirituality, I align with most of it. Some of the things I don't agree with. That's normal. And actually recently, I don't watch a lot of them, but I do look at YouTube quite a bit. I look at what shows up. I have different subscriptions that they show up, and just by reading the titles, I get a good input of where somebody's at. Recently, David Icke is on a channel called Inspired, and a lot of what he's bringing forward is that we're in a simulated reality. Well, I would say quite likely he's watching Jason of Archaics, who goes into have you had a chance to look at any of his work?
Well, I browsed him. I didn't went deep, but I went to his website and so on. So
Okay, so you got to go deep to
yeah,
really get it when you can.
I will.
Anyways, I have a feeling David Icke is watching Jason. um, and so more and more it's emerging, sort of from the depths of the unconscious, subconscious of the collective, that we are in a simulated reality. There's a lot of science, not a lot, but there are some scientists who are actually doing scientific experiments and following scientific principles and rigor in staying to a scientific framework, who have come out and said the only thing we can deduce from the facts and the data is we are in a simulation. And but anyway, so I like David Icke. Would love to actually have a conversation with him.
Sounds fantastic. Maybe we can organize that.
Great. Okay.
So, Kenneth, thanks very much for your time and these good news that the things have happened that changed the world and turned it upside down for the better. And thanks very much for being with us, and hope we can see us very soon.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.